Thank you so much for inviting me to the university today. I'm very honored to be here today. I'll briefly talk about how I made this documentary, and then I'll show you the film in exactly an hour. And then I will do the Q&A and open up the question and try to answer as I can. As you heard already about my biography, I moved to America 24 years ago to study. So one of the difficulty I had was the languages. I started to study English in the middle school level. So I was quite good at reading and writing, but spoken English wasn't that easy for me. So when I got here, the most difficult thing was really communicating in spoken English. And so as I tried to learn spoken languages, I actually got really interested in English. And I see the big difference in written English and spoken English. So it was one of the motivation for me to do something about languages in my filmmaking project. And then second of all, I coming from a culture where poetry is, in some sense, highly regarded because Confucius tradition, poets is the regarded as hardest, artists, and poetry in general is the hardest art form. And there are reasons for it in traditional Confucius learning. And lastly, my reason for this documentary was, as a filmmaker, I always interested in kind of parallel between how, for this case, artists' life, in some ways reflected on the work they do, like a writing here, poetry. So I want to investigate how this thing can be, shown in a documentary form. So that's the three motivation to make this documentary. And so I read it in a couple Asian American poetry anthology collection. By 1995, there are a couple of them. So I did some research and then I come up with some of the poets that I want to interview. But I kind of set up the boundary for my project. Like I just want to do somebody, Asian American woman, who mainly write in English only. So I kind of set up that limitation, and then I started sending out the invitation to those poets. And so I got pretty good response. So I started to shooting interview by 1996. And then with the word of mouth, and some poet heard about me through other one. So they contact me, so I contact them, so it kind of grew. So by the time when I was editing, around 2000, I had over 34,000 interviews. And the editing was quite challenging, but in the end I ended up including 16 poets. It's not about competition or anything, it's just the way I want to tell the stories in this film. So mainly, you can see kind of how this woman, it's pretty broad Asian American woman. Some of them are really recent immigrant, and some of them are like a third generation, a mixed race, like Chinese, black, and Hawaiian and Asian. And then you can hear from them how they use really English as their poetic languages. And I think that process about how using English language as poetic language is very interesting here as, writing students here. So you will learn about that a little bit. And also you will learn about how their life story a little bit, not much, but how that kind of parallels with the writing they do. And for me personally, it was a great learning experience. And I really learned a lot. And also, personal level, they're a very interesting human being. So that was a plus for me as a filmmaker to get to know these people. So further, I'm talking more about it. I'll show you the film, and I'll do the Q&A, and I'll try to address what you want to know more about.
I noticed the very artistic blending of image with the language, particularly of the poems. And where did you get all the images, like the historic images of people of Asians coming to the United States? And talk about that process of blending the image and finding all the images.
Well, the images from archival sources. So I use several archival sources, like Library of Congress for one source, and then UCLA have a very good Asian American archival source. I use them, and there's something else like a NBC News for the Vietnamese footage. There's different sources. So some of them was in public domain, so I didn't pay, just pay for the copies. Some I have to pay money for, like NBC source, things like that. And I just watching this after a couple of years. I haven't done public screening for a couple of years, and yeah, I mean, it's my take on Asian American woman poets. So I try to be more, somewhat poetic, to juxtapose some visual images, complement the reading. So it could walk sometimes, and sometimes it doesn't. And some of the interview, I can hear it again. I could be more kind to get more, explanation. I think it's kind of a little dance because we try to make a 1-hour piece, so we really cut it to really essence of the story. So sometimes it's not very kind to explain everything, but that's how we ended up making it. And when I ask all these poets to read for me, I mean, when I did the interview, I usually give a series of questions, like categorize your biographical information, where your family coming from, and why you become a poet, what kind of education you have, and what are you trying to do writing poetry, you have a social, political agenda, or you just have artistic ambitions, and all these people have a different reason. And a lot of people that I didn't put it in, not because their poetry is not interesting or wonderful, because their story or what they write was kind of, in a way, redundant with other people. So I ended up not putting in. But there are a lot of wonderful Asian American poets I didn't end up putting in. And some are, disappointed, but that's how the editing went. And I also asked them, pick 1 or 2 poems from your poetry that you could read under 2 minutes, so we could do the shooting. We discussed where we're going to shoot, where we're shooting this, all that. And then sometimes after we shoot the initial, the spoken, this poetry presentation, and then afterward I shoot the visuals to try to comment. And I think sometimes it works and sometimes it's disruptive. It's my personal feeling. Yeah. And also a lot of biographical photos from poet they provide for me, so that was very helpful too.
It occurs to me that the way you got this assembled, you could either make it more of a condemnation of American culture on the people you interview, or it could be an affirmation. And I was kind of surprised by the very ending how it affirms America. It almost feels like Ralph Waldo Emerson saying, the great thing about America is we have poets. Was that intentional to affirm America at the end? Did you debate over how to do that?
No, when you ask him questions, and especially a documentary, you don't really expect the ending, and you're trying to really reflect what this poet's trying to say. And depends on point of view. I think that they coming from different background, their personal stories, and that out of their personal stories somehow they find the writing and they write. So I try to reflect their intention, not necessarily my intention. And then I thought, because to me the impetus of writing is important. So that's something that I want to put in towards the end, not from the beginning. When you edit, you could go different ways. You could start from I would say something very positive, or go to the negative, or something from something unexpected or negative to something in a way positive. And like the first quote you saw, Stacy and Chino, I didn't think she couldn't fit any of those poets that I could try to group them. So I could put her at the beginning or at the end. And to me, she's like the least Asian woman, like in a way she was struggle with the meaning. Because she was only at the time when I interviewed her, she was in her mid-20s. And she just came to America a couple years ago. And she really trying to find who I am. You know, she always thought she was just a black person in, you know, Jamaica. But when she came to New York, she found this Asian American Writers Workshop. And she but she actually, in a way, trying to find her Asianness. And so I think she was very ambiguous about who she was. And I thought that was a good starting point to open up the question. So that's why I ended up, instead of putting her in the end, I put her in the beginning of the documentary. And she's quite successful. I mean, she was in this poetry jam on Broadway. They're like a young poets, spoken word poets. It's a Broadway show of what's going on a couple of years. And she got invited to all kinds of spoken word competition or presentation, and her fee was very expensive, you know, to invite her. And so she also wrote a couple of years ago her kind of biography. And then that was actually one-person show in the downtown theater like 2 years ago. Things like that. Yes.
You've got a wonderful cross-section.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed to focus with everything. It wasn't offensive, but it played up the problems that come and the struggle inside with the Asianness. And even when they're full Japanese or full Chinese, when they're in America, they still struggle with trying to find their place, especially if there's a second, third generation, where they don't look in the mirror all the time. They feel American, don't they? And so they present different. But I appreciated very much hearing them. This has been seen by many, many people. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so it has a voice. And I appreciate that voice. Thank you. Yes.
Well, I actually, before I finished this documentary, I did a high school tour with the work in progress.
Good.
It's like, work in progress is like a really rough cut, you know, before you do the online editing. So it's like I have 1 hour, I went to a different high school in New York, New Jersey area. And actually, that's actually more interesting response. They're really asking a question because they're not really exposed to poetry that much. And the school that I visit is not necessarily have a lot of Asian population. Sometimes some, like a area in Queens and Brooklyn, there are no 1 or 2 Asian students and everybody else is black. Or if you go to Long Island, it's white, things like that. But they had an interesting question they really asked me, and that was, for me, more interesting too. And where university setting is different.
In what ways does this documentary parallel your own journey?
My own journey?
Yeah.
I guess I in a way, reflects my life. I mean, some ways, but I'm not a poet, I'm a filmmaker. And I don't really write poetry. And I think I'll never be because I'm not that good. That's why I choose filmmaking. But I guess parallel is something I always, when I make a film or video, I always start with something that I'm interested in, but then I never really have any answers or anything. So it's my own exploration of something. So I guess that's the parallel. But I tell you the truth, I don't have any dramatic life as some of those poets, like whether my parents died when I was young or anything like that, or I came here when I was 23, and I married quite young. I was 26, and I was pursuing my career, and I had a child just right after I finished this documentary. So it's kind of late start, And so I would say pretty stable life. But I guess something that I can be more with this poets, like, try to say something, trying to reflect something in a way. Maybe it could be everyday life, or it could be period time that I'm observing. Like the documentary I'm working on about this actress, Asian American actress, Yunah Hong. She was popular in 1920s and 30s. And I've been working on for almost 8 years, and it's almost done. And it's a different time, really different place. But the struggles are the same. I mean, that the way she trying to make her own place in Hollywood, she had a lot of obstacles and difficulty. Maybe we don't have that kind of difficulty now, but in essence, always people trying to make something out of everyday life or the world you live in, to like a little piece of poetry or a little piece of documentary. It's the same struggle.
In your film, everybody tells their own story, so there's really no narration.
Mm-hmm.
As a filmmaker, what do you feel about using voiceover or narration, but also, 'cause this is really difficult. You have to make these interviews fit together, and these people tell their story, and there's some continuity here. It worked very well.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes, did you ever feel the urge that you have to have some narration to fill in some background or to tell some history?
Right. I mean, I actually never used voiceover for my piece. I mean, I like this one, to me, like just observing and presenting this wonderful woman, it's my task. That not necessarily I have to say something, and my probably editorial decision will reflect my intention. But I never want to give any strong voiceover to explain everything. And I choose to, when I try to give a little time frame of history of Asian American poetry, I just use text and some samples from the period. And so I never really use voiceover, but the project that I'm working on, I don't really have a voiceover, but my main character, Yunah Hong, we have a lot of wonderful, wonderful archival footage, but I use an actress to do voiceover thing. We recorded, and I edited with the pictures, but you don't really feel like this is this woman, this incredible person. So I tried that a couple years, and I give up, and then I said, well, it's not going to work, and I decided to cast somebody who looked like her and dress up like her, exact same clothes from my research, and present her as, in a way, storyteller and narrator and everything, and telling her story from her point of view. So for my latest documentary, I'm doing that, but in the past, I didn't do it. It just, I don't know, I think it all depends on the project, what you're trying to grow. Sometimes, especially maybe if you are the filmmaker is the, in a way, you are the observer of the certain stories. If you feel you're really close to it, sometimes I think it's the best, and sometimes maybe not. But a lot of cases, I think it's all depends on the story and how you approach it. So that's why I said it's not very kind by this project. You can hear from those women, but then there's kind of a little gap or little things that you could explain more to the narrator, but which I didn't. Also the way, when you edit, like the way what the previous person say and then what the next person take over, there's this decision of you cutting. That have to be very careful. Sometimes that will make a big difference.